Good afternoon and welcome to the 2026 Medfield Candidate Forum with our candidates for the Select Board. Very happy to be here today at the Medfield TV studio. This forum began in 2025 as a collaboration of Medfield TV, the Medfield Insider, the Medfield Environmental Action Committee, and myself and my fledgling organization, Medfield in Common. I want to thank Medfield TV for its forum sponsorship. Medfield TV has also made itself available to offer short video clips for each of the candidates running for office, whether they are running contested or uncontested. These videos will be available before the election on Medfield TV's YouTube channel. And the videos are available to the candidates to use in further introducing themselves to the Medfield voting community or advocating for their election. I'll make just one comment. What we are doing here today is we are witnessing democracy in action. In order to have democracy in action work, we need volunteers in Medfield, residents of Medfield, our neighbors, to step up like the two individuals that we're going to be talking to over the next hour. It takes a level of commitment and courage to do this, to put yourself before the voters. I've done it a couple dozen times, and I also want to speak to the other half of that, which is democracy in action is with the voters. So just urging, encouraging the voters who are watching this to come out to vote on March 30th, to go to the polls, to be informed and committed citizens. That's what makes all of this work and work well. So let me begin by introducing our candidates. On my immediate right is Gus Murby, and next to Gus on his right is Peter Saladino. So thank you both for being candidates for office and for being here. There's not much to talk about around proceedings. We talked about them just before we began. I'm going to give you each an opportunity to be able to make a kind of an opening introduction. The community knows each of you, but this is an opportunity to be able to speak. 90 seconds or so would be great. I may ask a question following your introduction, and then it will be an exchange of questions that will be directed to each of you or to both of you, and we'll alternate going back and forth in answering those questions. There may be some follow-up. There's a number of things to talk about, so what I would ask is that during the questions, many of the questions, I may just ask you to just keep it to a couple of minutes so that we can get through, a range of questions, and that would be great. So with that said, Peter, why don't you look into the camera and introduce yourself, if you would.
Hi, I'm Pete Saladino. I live on Boyden Road with my wife Alexis and my two kids, Maddie and Jake. My daughter's Maddie's in high school as a freshman. My son Jake is in the 5th grade at Dale School. We live on Boyden Road near the Chipotle, as my kids like to say. We've been in town for about a decade. In the last 2 years, I've served on the Warrant Committee, which was a great experience. I stepped down in December to run for this role. Looking forward to sharing my views and to speaking with you here today.
Gus?
Hello, I'm Gus Murby. I'm farther down the road than Pete is on a whole bunch of things here. I'm running for re-election to the Select Board. This will be if I'm re-elected, it would be my 4th term on the Select Board. I'm guessing many people at least know my name because we've been here in town for just over 30 years now. I thought it might be helpful, people may know my name, but maybe they don't know my background. I'm a West Point grad. After serving on active duty in the Army, I went back and got a public policy degree from the Kennedy School of Government. And focused on energy and environmental policy. At one point I thought I was going to stay in government, but instead I got into consulting, and I've had a career as a management consultant for a little over 40 years now. I think I'm finally at the point where I think I'm going to get the plane down on the ground and start to enjoy retirement outside of the time I put into the Select Board. My wife Jean is a pediatric physical therapist who works at Spalding Rehab. We had four boys, grew up here in Medfield, went through the Medfield school systems. We've been very happy with the experience that we've had in Medfield. And our boys now, I won't say we're happy they're out of the house, but they're all out of the house and grown and off to careers. So we're sort of enjoying things here in Medfield. From the standpoint of town service, I started off with an appointment by Scott back in 2009. I had to look that up. I actually first started in 2009 and spent 6 years on the warrant committee. I was the chair for 3 of those years. And during that time, and then right after I left the warrant committee, I also was an original member of the OPEB Trust Fund Committee, served as chair to begin with. And also in that period before I joined the Board of Selectmen, I served on the State Hospital Advisory Committee. It was the second iteration, so the expanded SHAC, which was the committee that came up with the recommendation to the town to buy the state hospital. At a certain point, a couple of years after I got off the warrant committee, I ran in 2016 and the election in 2017 for my first term on the Board of Selectmen. I can tell you at the time, the 2 biggest things that were on my mind was the successful redevelopment of the Medfield State Hospital property and getting the Dale Street School over the finish line. Those haven't been done yet, so I'm still here. I'm still trying to get those 2 things done. In addition, I'm once again a member of the OPEB Trust Fund Committee. I'm also a member of the Norfolk County Advisory Board, which is sort of a little-known board for most people, but it's a board that's basically supportive of the Norfolk County government. And there was a point in time when I decided maybe we needed to be a little more involved in that. And as of this year, I'm on my first year as a member of the executive committee of that board, which we'll see whether they made a good decision about that or not. Okay. I also serve on the MBTA advisory committee, which just because I'm interested in keeping track of what the MBTA is doing. I'll stop.
Yeah,
there.
no, much will come out, right? I mean, in terms of the questions, and that's the point. But no, I appreciate both of your service in town. I have the honor of having appointed both of you, former Selectman Mike Marcucci, our moderator Mike Pastore, of all the service to the warrant committee, the current warrant committee. Also, as well, I like to honor the warrant committee as much as possible and everybody's service. So thanks for that. Just so that I don't miss any of the key issues, I guess I would ask you each if you could just on a kind of a 1, 2, 3 basis as you look at the issues that you think are at the forefront of what you would be wanting to talk to the residents, the parents, the taxpayers about. And so not much more than, like a kind of here are the 3 things that are the motivating causes for me being here to run for office.
Well,
we'll start with you this time,
yeah.
Peter, and next time we'll start with Gus.
Okay. Well, I think first off, I believe in a balanced budget. I think Medfield, without an override, I think that Medfield's gotten expensive for seniors. It's gotten expensive for young families. It's gotten expensive for everybody, and I think we have to really work hard to make sure this is a place that the people who live here can afford to continue to live here. That's super important to me. I support our schools. The reason we moved here was because of the amazing schools. We literally, a decade ago, Googled top 25 school districts in Boston and worked our way to Medfield. And so it's incredibly important. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the schools. And we can get into it further, but I think there's a way that the town can improve its budgeting. It's a bit, can be, let's say, modernized a bit, and that's something we can really dive into. But there's been a lot of inflation over the last bunch of years, and the inflation has hit the schools particularly hard, and also some of the increased mandates of how many teachers for special needs that they must hire, and so it's been a bit difficult for them, and that I think is reflected in the budgetary strain that everyone is under in the town. And the last one I would say is I also support a community center at a rebuilt FAF alongside the new Dale Street School. I think that's also a very important part of bringing the community together, and is something that is an area that I think could be improved upon.
Okay, so big picture town economics, schools, including, and then budgeting, a little bit about the way we do those things, and the community center. Well, yeah. They were all on my pages, so thank you for highlighting those. We'll come around to talk about each of those, I think, and for you, Gus.
So I think my priorities are slightly different, although not totally out of sync with particularly your point about the economics and the budget, Pete. Because of the background I have, the biggest issue that's been on my mind is the successful redevelopment of the Medfield State Hospital. It's an extremely complex process. It will have a big impact Certainly a positive impact, I think, financially, but it's also going to have a big impact in terms of the people in town. I think it will turn into a tremendous project if it's done successfully, but as some people that follow this may be aware, the political waters in terms of looking for steady support from the state is a challenge. I've been involved with that since actually before we bought it in 2014, probably around 2012, and I've stayed close to that project throughout, and I still want to see that go across. Second item for me is the Dale Street School. We have to get a new school built. It has to be built at a reasonable price. It has to be a good school. It has to, and it's going to be a 50-year school. That's what we're building these days, of 50-year schools. And I don't mean like the Dale Street School, which was built as maybe a 20 or 30-year school that we just used for at least 50 years, but a true school. And that's going to be hard. There's going to be significant, the debt override, I don't see any way that not being a big number. And by the time we get to where we're going to ask the taxpayers to pay for that, they need to understand, they need to be satisfied that the town has done its best to come up with the most cost-effective price for the school. And then I'm hoping that if that happens, we can, those of us in government can convince the taxpayers it's absolutely worth the investment. The third one, to Pete's point, right now the town is facing extremely difficult fiscal challenges, largely because of the growth in the healthcare costs, but also partially growth in things like labor costs over time. We're facing 2 fiscal years where trying to stay within the Prop 2.5 limits is, I think, going to be difficult, if not impossible to do. I'm usually a budget hawk. I want to stay under the Prop 2.5 limits. This particular year, I believe a prudent operating override is going to be necessary. And when we get there, we'll see if we have a prudent amount that I can support, but I do believe this is a year that I'll be on the side of trying to convince taxpayers that this is the time we should think about accepting an operating override. And then 2 years from now, there's going to be a debt override. So trying to navigate 2 years of fiscal pressure on the operating side, followed by 1 year of debt override pressure. Those are the 3 things that are on the top of my list.
Well, the common one had to do with the economic challenges for the town. Overrides that are proposed and being talked about. I think everybody is kind of aware. Impacts on the taxpayer. Major projects that are upcoming and anticipated. All of the elements. It happens in a town that we know that has a predominantly, 76% of our financing, I think, or more comes from our tax base and our local fees. How does this work? Why don't you take us, Gus? What can you do as a select person to influence that pathway of economics?
So I've had a philosophy for several years around Prop 2.5. First off, I think it's, as much as many people complain about it if they're in government, I think Prop 2.5 is one of the best pieces of legislation that any state has in the country. Because it forces government to stay within the budgets that every one of us has to stay within when we're in what we live on. So my attitude has generally been that we need to stay within Prop 2.5 limits unless the wages and income over a period of time have been better than 2.5%. And I'm excluding or ignoring, if you will, the fixed income people who are on retirement. I understand that's not what they may see. But my view has been that if you want a Prop 2.5 override in a period of time where people aren't seeing 2.5% income increases from year to year, what you're telling the taxpayer is that we have a better idea of how to spend your money than you do. It happens to be, I think in the past couple of years, there's been a general growth in wages, which is what softened me a little bit on my normal opposition to overrides. That combined with some of the uncontrolled pressures that we have. So that's where I'm coming from around that. I think the key for a town government to convince taxpayers to support that is going to be to convince taxpayers that we've done everything we can to get rid of, I won't call it superfluous, but I'll at least call it discretionary expenses at a time when everybody's stretched. And if we do ask for something, that the taxpayers will understand there's a good reason for it.
Pete, how do you think about these challenges?
You know, I went back and looked at the 2016 warrant report, annual town meeting report, and it was a time of rising healthcare costs, maybe an override, trying to build a community center, talking about building a school. I think that some of the challenges we're facing now are challenges that are kind of happen quite frequently. It's just, it's a part of, what we have to deal with and what, the town has had to deal with for years. It's not a unique situation, I don't think. I think, what I would emphasize is that as the town, I looked back also at what percentage of the total budget was spent on each department. And it was surprising to say that it was basically the same, almost exactly the same. The only differences were that back then in 2016, we had a bunch of debt that was coming off of the books because we had funded a 20-year projects for the high school and other things. And so we were paying a lot in interest and debt retirement. Now, we're not paying the debt because it's lower. But that has all gone into the costs for healthcare costs and other types of costs for having employees. And I think that's kind of an important point because we're about to go talk about bringing on more debt. So we've sort of made the last few years happen by offsetting debt with the employee costs of having healthcare and benefits have been offset by the debt payments going away. So now we're at this critical moment. But I think it's really important to realize that actually the percentage spent on schools is exactly the same as it was 10 years ago. And over that time, what the state has mandated the schools do in terms of bringing on certain types of teachers for special needs, all these different types of requirements that have been placed upon the schools means it's harder and harder for the schools to fund those enrichment and advancement and honors programs that we're all so proud of. And so what we need to do is be mindful of all the changes that have happened that have been imposed upon the town, and we can't just sort of take the same approach. I think that's really critical. And so I think it's worth knowing and reviewing what the school superintendent has proposed as a budget is above the 2.5%, and the school committee has proposed something yet above that. But I think it's most important to realize that the budgeting process we go about starts at the very beginning with, and we spend all year on this, but at the very beginning it starts with almost a handshake old school approach, which is we take 3/4 of the budget and put it for the schools, and we take 1/4 and put it for the town. And that's remained the same for the last decade. And one of the challenges is the inflation within all the different parts of the town has grown at totally different rates. And so the school is under tremendous pressure because they have had the same amount of allocated budget over the last decade, and as have other parts of the town. And so what needs to happen, I think, is a lot better communication of these types of issues as I'm communicating here today. And I think we need to understand that the cost pressures have changed for each of the different types of services provided. It's not a peanut butter approach where everything is very similar to what it was 10 years ago. The services have had different cost inflation, and we need to review each one of them on a detailed basis and be transparent with the community about what we're facing.
Good. In the interest of dialogue, actually, I'm going to go back and forth here a little bit, just in terms of follow-up on this. And this is, this is so core to, what's going on in town, or what's important to be thinking about. And the select board is the place where a lot of it is can be influenced. So, do you want to comment further on Peter's thoughts?
Will.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you're going to get a dissenting view, so just
yeah, we'll give Peter an opportunity to be a counter-dissenting view.
2 points that I would counter with. One, just to be clear, debt overrides, when the debt, you're right, the principal has gone down on debt, and the impact of that is that people's taxes don't go up. That does not, we don't get to trade off reductions in debt principal against healthcare cost increases. The healthcare cost increases are on the operating side of the budget that's subject to the Prop 2.5 levy. When you pass a debt override, that comes off of that limit on the Prop 2.5. So for the taxpayer, it feels like taxes aren't going up because the debt principal is going down, so not paying that part even though the operating budget is going up if we stay within Prop 2.5 limits at 2.5% a year. When we have the next debt override, which will be for the Dale Street School, you'll see people screaming bloody murder because their taxes are suddenly going to jump up, because that's going to be a very big thing. So that's just a little technical thing about how that works. As the person who pushed to get that 75-25 position set up, I totally disagree with Pete about that. And I'll tell you why. The way that I did a similar thing going back even farther. And every year, the town had a different way of getting to an agreement between the schools and the town. We would go through a different process every year. And when I went through those, every year, even though the process was different, we always came back to 75-25% if you only isolated the actual operating budgets. 75% goes to the schools, 25% goes to the town. The structure of that methodology is, as I understand it, referred to as the Lexington model, because Lexington is actually the first town to try to put some controls that kept the schools from just becoming ever-growing, and obviously Lexington has good schools. So it's not a question, the place where I would disagree, I guess, is I don't think the cost increases on the town side are so much less than the school side. There are definitely mandatory requirements from the state. The towns have the ability to fight that using the unfunded mandate law that says the state can't just dump stuff on us. But I don't think the state's perfect about that. I do think the 75-25 is an important discipline we have around how we distribute our operating budgets. And if we choose to change that, then you need to understand, if we go to 80-20 or whatever it is, you need to understand there need to be programmatic changes on the town side, because the town will be making a decision. It wants to move closer and closer to being a school department that has, you know, some amenities for the people that don't have kids in the school that are paying taxes to support the schools.
Okay, that's a good pause point. Peter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, that's pretty interesting. I think that, you know, I don't agree that the 75-25 has helped us be very detail-oriented on the specific cost drivers by all the different function types. And I don't see how it could be. I mean, the cost of a librarian is not the same as it was a decade ago, but it certainly varies differently than the cost of a teacher, because there's totally different jobs, and the police and the fire as well. I think it's true that the percentage of budget may change for each of the different functions if you obviously go from a sort of bottom up and say, what are we trying to do here? But there are solutions to that. You can regionalize certain functions. There can be, other towns have done regionalized police, or regionalized fire, or regionalized libraries. And I think that, you know, what we heard about earlier in the year was, oh, let's, you know, get rid of all of the school crossing guards. It's a very sort of knee-jerk and sort of basic response to not understanding the challenges. And I think there are very many solutions that can be proposed so that we can fund our schools and meet the needs that everyone really wants for excellence in education, while being mindful that there are other ways that we can, you know, approach the rest of the town's services. And I thought the critical point I came across when I looked at the numbers was, I thought, gosh, the school would be just taking ever more amounts of dollars. But when I went back and looked at decade on decade numbers, it's the exact same percentage of the total budget as it was in 2016 and as it is now. And so it's not the case that the school has been overtaking the budget and overwhelming things. But we're at a situation now where the healthcare costs, part of the problem with this year's budget, I think, just to be very clear, is that there is a sort of a budget buster problem, which is there's a 2.5% state mandated increase that's supposed to be followed, and then there's some like new houses that get built, so it can maybe be a little bit more than that because it's 2.5 for the existing people. So that comes out to be about 2.8, 2.9, something like that. But the problem is the health care costs of our employees, of the town employees, has gone up by over $1 million. And that breaks the model. And so in order to fund that, we've had to have a very difficult discussion, because it's very hard to make all the other numbers add up to 2.5 or 2.8 or 2.9% when one of the numbers grows by, you know, more than half of the total amount that's available to go up. That's the underlying math.
That's the problem, though, right?
Well,
I mean, that's
think
what
you
we're
might-
trying to figure out, and so.
I think you might hopefully learn more about it today.
Yeah.
And I think we can learn more about communication and how the townspeople can understand a lot of it, because it's complicated.
Yeah.
And the more we talk about this, I think, as a town, we understand the moving parts, we understand our options, and we understand what other towns have done well. You know, we can come up with solutions together. And I think that, you know, that's kind of the way I would approach it.
Well, solutions was the word that was coming to my mind as you were talking, and these are executive solutions, right, that we have to put into action. But let's get on to some other issues. We'll get back, and I think that the question of finance and budgeting and town economics will pop out through a lot of these other questions, because we have a lot of other big initiatives to be talking about. Let's talk a little bit about the Dale Street School project, which gets us right to that. Let's keep this one relatively short in terms of, and you can speak to it in terms of what you favor, what you disfavor, or you can take an approach to say what you think needs to be done, process, what are the key ingredients in order to be successful in building, you know, a really great new school. So, Gus, I think why don't you take it on Dale Street first?
For starters, because the prior Dale Street School project did not pass, I share the sense of urgency I think a lot of people in town have with not wanting to go through that cycle again. One of the things that I think is going to be crucial for the success of the second project is the town needs to have confidence that the school building committee itself has taken a hard look at what needs to be done, with the mind to not want to allow the cost of the school to go, you know, through the roof just without controls, but also with the mind of making sure that the school is a top-notch school, one that'll last for a long time. Personally, with the membership of the school building committee that we have, I'm comfortable that we have people who are cost conscious, which is making it a lot easier for me to simply just say, this is a really important school project. And so I anticipate, not knowing for sure what this is ultimately going to be, that I will be an active and vocal supporter. For those who are tracking, they know I was not as active and vocal a supporter the last time around. So I think it's urgent. I think the key, that I think the committee has already dealt with, is that there's a lot more effort into reaching out to the public to make sure the public knows what's going on. Personally, I think a lesson that I hope we've learned from the last time around is that when the public has questions, it's not a matter of telling the public what your answer to their question must be. It's a matter of having an engaged discussion with the public, listening to the issues that they're concerned about. You may wind up telling them that you can't accommodate what they think, but I've learned in my own experience that you don't have to always give people what they want. You do always have to convince people they've had a fair hearing, and they've had a cordial discussion where you've listened and heard their rationales, and you've done your best to help them understand yours.
Good. Peter.
I remember on the morning of the Dale Street vote the last time, I asked my kids, so what do you think? What do you think of this whole thing? And they said, oh, we shouldn't move the school from Dale. And I said, uh-oh. You know, that's a problem, because that's what the proposal was to move the school up to Wheelock. I think that a key thing I would like to communicate on that is we should be mindful that you need a 2/3 vote for such an expensive project. So you need 2/3 of the town to agree. It's very hard to get 2/3 of the people to agree on anything. And I think what happened at the first Dale Street vote was that the people who, there's always going to be some people who don't want to spend the money on the big expensive project, which is understandable. And there's people who didn't want to move the school. And those two groups were more than a third. And so you need to be trying to change as little as possible in that regard. And I think it's very good that it's going to be, the new school building committee focused like a laser on keeping the project at the Dale Street site, which is very smart. They've done an excellent job communicating. I think they've done a really a strong job. I fully support the Dale Street project. I think it's much better now that the estimates for the population size of the school has gone down, because the estimates from the prior effort were way out of whack, and it drove the costs beyond what maybe they should have been. But at any rate, I voted for it last time, even though I didn't like it was moving up to Wheelock. I'll vote it for it again this time, but I'm glad to see it's going to stay at Dale. It opens up some opportunities with the FAF site, which we can talk about, I'm sure, in a follow-on question. But in general, I 100% support the Dale Street School rebuild.
Great. Let's switch gears a little bit just to talk about something a little bit more general, but just as important, because it's communication, right? And the engagement with the people in town, and how the town undertakes that, which materializes in people coming out to vote and going to town meeting and being interested in the activities of the of the civic government. Peter, how do you think about the select board communicating with the town and its importance, and how engagement can be improved?
It's a tough topic. I think across America, there's not really good sources of information anymore. There's not real. People don't all watch the same news. Very, very few people watch the evening news. Even Facebook is hard to communicate on. I think we don't have newspapers as much anymore. It's hard to stay dialed in to what's going on. The medium of communicating has changed so much. I think as a town we definitely spend too much time recording things on YouTube and expecting people will have the time to go watch it. That's, I think, unacceptable, honestly. I think we need to be able to do that, but then summarize what's going on and communicate much more clearly with the town on the status. And I think that's really not that great right now. I don't think there are very good communication streams from very few of the town groups that, with the exception of the sports teams that my kids are on, they're very good communicators. But in general, it's hard to know what's going on. I think actually Medfield Insider does a wonderful job, and you can read that in your weekly inbox. But it's not easy to be plugged in to what's going on and to find ways to get involved. I think that's
any proposals, any things, ways in which you think that
I do. I think, well, first of all, I think there's a little, we're all evolving here into the future, but there's still some old school stuff where the town posts the meeting minutes of any meeting on the town website within the month of it being concluded, and that may comply with whatever state law that we have to do, but we shouldn't be relying on that. And in fact, in the select board this year, I was disappointed to find out that there was over a year of this year's select board meetings did not have those meeting minutes posted. So, that was when I was going in to specifically look for a particular issue, but normally I would never be looking at the select board's minutes to find out what's going on. I think there needs to be a summary that can be either AI generated or whatever generated, or that could be part of the task of the town moderator's team, the town administrator's team, to communicate out particular different AI summaries of what the different groups have talked about. But I think we have to evolve, and I think we, even though there are some good solutions with Medfield Insider and others, and some Facebook groups, we really shouldn't be relying on the town to be the townspeople to be self-reporting rumor and innuendo. We should be able to hear clear readouts from the town's committees on what they're thinking and what the summary of the meetings are. We do every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks is a meeting, but once every 6 months we'll see a communication piece from most of the people in these positions, and I think that's a disconnect.
Okay. Communication and engagement, Gus.
Yeah. There's a couple things in trying to help the public understand the issues that we deal with. I'm sympathetic to something that if you're not involved in town government or on committees where you're there because you have to be for all the meetings and you hear the full set of comments, a lot of the topics that we deal with have complexities to them that it's almost not reasonable to expect the members of the public to put the time and effort into understanding that you're going to put into if you're in a committee. So as I look at communicating with the public, one of the things I realize is that a challenge here is how do you tell the public enough about what you're doing that they feel comfortable that maybe you really do know what you're doing, recognizing that if you tried to tell them everything you think they should know to fully understand an issue, they probably aren't that interested in the issue. My wife routinely will get on my case, even with Medfield Day. We actually went a couple of years ago to Medfield Day, and I never got past the corner of Meeting House Pond where Ferrari comes in. I spent they were taking the booths down, and we had never moved off that because people came in, and I have a bad habit of being willing to talk about these things. I'm kind of fascinated with it. So one part of it is, people say they want to know things, but in some ways they only want to know about the things that they actually discover they care about. And there's 100 things, and they care about 3. And so that's just a challenge in trying to get that done. I'll second Pete's endorsement in Medfield Insider. I confess that sometimes rather than going to the town website, I find that I can read Chris's summary of the upcoming agendas, and we'll have a far faster and better idea of what town meetings I should be zooming in for and things like that. So it's a great time saver, and I actually think it takes a lot of time and effort to report that in a way that doesn't have a distracting political spin to it. It's just what it is. So that's helpful. As a selectman, when I first joined the Board of Selectmen, I'll comment, the ones that we have right now, Pete has been on for a long time, and Pete has his own blog. So he chose a way that he wants to reach out.
Not me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're not there yet. No, this is Pete Peterson. Eileen she didn't totally grow up here in Medfield, but she graduated from Medfield High School. She knows people in this town I haven't met in 30 years that she just knows, and she knows them all by first name. So she has a channel to do that. When Mike Marcucci was on, and I was the newest Board of Selectmen member, I was trying to figure out, well, I don't want to duplicate. What do I do? And I chose to basically spend time on Facebook. I do Friends of Medfield and Concerned Citizens. I don't go broader than that. And the reason I did that is I figured that was one way I could meet people where they were at. It's a useful early warning radar. It's not perfect, but if there's an issue, I tend to detect it. And if people are talking about issues, I mostly listen. I have a rule. My rule's tighter than what the state requires. I will comment on matters of fact. So if somebody says something and it's factually incorrect, I will come back in, and most people that see me post will see that. My rule is, or I will express an opinion on Facebook that I have already publicly expressed in an open meeting. In the 9 years that I've been on the Board of Selectmen Select Board, I've probably done that 3 times. So I really try to limit my conversation or my post to matters of fact. Rarely, if somebody responds to me, do I actually respond again. I occasionally do if I think it's harmless, but I don't want to get sucked into a back and forth dialogue that gets me into kind of expressing opinions because somebody glommed onto my post and then tried to, reel me in on something else. So those are the rules that I live by. I think I could do a better job of things like Pete, for example. He has his Friday hours at the COA. Now, that's his bailiwick. I'm not going to say, I'll do Thursday hours. I'm not going to do that. I wish, with all the things that I do, I could still find some ways to spend more time in public and just going to public events. There's been some great history sessions about, especially this year, and I can't get to them. So personally, I would like to do more of that stuff and just meet people where they're at spontaneously. But
well, glad to have you here at this forum.
Yeah, I'm glad this forum's here. Yeah.
I'm going to ask just a couple of questions, just that I'm going to be short answer questions. I mean, they're important topics, so I hate to reduce them to a short answer, but I want to come around to some other big topics as well. So
this isn't going to be like a congressional hearing where it's a yes/no answer.
No, it's not yes/no, but it's also it's more to get the sense of how do you feel about these topics than to explain everything. So the first one, vibrancy of the downtown. How do you think about the select board, the role of, one of the things that I like about Medfield is we have restaurants. I like the vibrancy of the downtown. I like coming into the downtown of Medfield. How do you think about the importance of that, or what we can do to continue to enhance that? Or is it important to you at all?
It's super important to me. When we moved to Medfield, the reason we didn't move to Dover or to Westwood was we didn't like the downtown, and we loved the downtown of Medfield. And that was very clear why we chose that. And I think it could be improved, but I think we have a great downtown, and that's the core attribute of the town. You want to see it kind of continuing to grow and flourish. We have some good restaurants, we have some good shops, but we have some sort of for rent kind of situations as well. So it's not all roses, and I think we need to listen to what the business community is saying. I know we, as a town, don't have as large of a percentage of our budget comes from business taxes, so we're always looking for ways to grow the business tax base. I think what's been done up at the state hospital can help, but in general, we should find ways to continue to grow our business tax base and to make the downtown thrive. That is one of the key reasons why I proposed the citizens petition warrant that you'll probably get to later in questions, to rebuild the FAF Center right where it is, and to bring all different types of generations of the community together right in that perfect spot, and not to give it up to a parking lot for Dale Street School. Okay.
Well, that's a good link to a question I'll ask in a couple of minutes. And Gus, the downtown, our downtown and its vibrancy?
So I'm happy with where, I'll try to keep it short, but I'm happy with where the downtown has gone. If I take away Avenue, 21 North, even Noon Hill Grill, and that's sort of what the downtown felt like to me 30 years ago when we moved here. When we started to get some really good restaurants show up, all of a sudden I saw a difference. Basil has always been there, but you got to know how to get there to know about Basil. And so I see the effect of the development that we've seen. We've gone a little higher end, and all of a sudden it's nicer. There's a couple things that are going on in town that I think are going to help. The planning board has got a pending zoning change here for mixed use, with the idea that we could put apartments above, say, where Brothers is and that whole block, that we'd actually be able to allow residential apartments above commercial areas. I think that's going to help. Because another piece of downtown is not just getting the businesses down there, but it's also getting the people down there. And ideally, a lot of the people would like to be able to go down there and walk there as opposed to automatically having to drive. So I'm optimistic about that. The other thing that's going on right now that I think is going to help when we're finished is this wayfinding committee that's basically going to put a higher grade set of signs up that's going to give a certain coherence and unity. And then the other thing that's going on is some of the traffic calming things. We're realigning some of the crosswalks and doing some things, some of which are not structural, some of them are just painting. It's kind of interesting. You can simply, on some of our intersections, paint part of the road to make it look like it's not the road, and because drivers see a narrower lane, even though it's still there, they tend to be, it's a traffic calming technique, and I think we need some of that because it's a pretty busy downtown as far as traffic goes.
Okay, and you can circle around on any of these in your final comments. There will be final comments when we're wrapping up. So this is an issue I don't know a lot about, but I've read a lot, about accessory dwelling units, and so educate me, or I know there's pros and cons, and where do we stand, and where should we go?
You're hitting me on a hot button issue, but I'm going to give you a broader but still short answer. The state passed 40B. 10% had to be affordable units, and we did that. We sometimes refer to that as capital A affordable, because you have to qualify for those affordable units. When we bought the state hospital property, we bought that property so that we could control our destiny on 40B. We're putting up 334 apartment units there that count for 334 units. Unfortunately, because of a whole range of things, we were not able to develop the state hospital property as fast as we wanted to. So even though we bought the state hospital property to avoid being victims of random 40Bs, and we've got some that are still going on right now, we've been hit with the random 40Bs, and now when the state hospital property comes in, we'll be at something more like 17% 40B affordable units. I didn't mind that at first, because I said, okay, we'll overachieve. If that's the state wants something, what's so bad about a town trying to do more than what the state forces you to do? But then they passed the MBTA Communities Act, which is high density zoning. Kudos to the planning board. They found a way for us to comply with that primarily by simply increasing the density of the already dense things like the park. It was zoned for 12 units per acre. We just upped it to 15 units per acre, and then we complied with the MBTA Communities Act. The one place that we actually rezoned new places was down along Frary Street, down near
Got to get you
Turtle.
back under the ADUs. I
Okay,
know
okay,
because
well,
the
then
MB...
so I'm leading up to that. We did, but I'll cut this short. That was an area that we actually did rezone, and my thought there was if anybody's going to get a windfall for selling their individual houses to get some high-density housing, let it be the folks that are, they have some of the older houses on Prairie Street. All right, we did that. We complied with that. And what does the state come in with but an ADU law that allows people to put a second unit on their property? I was all in favor of ADUs as an integral part of a house. In-law apartments, au pair apartments, yes, yes, yes. Separate standalone houses that do not have the housing does not have to be owner occupied. What we just did is if you look at what's going on across the country, you have real estate companies like BlackRock who are buying homes that are the individually owned homes, converting them into rental property and taking them off the home ownership market. The state, in my opinion, just gave the BlackRocks of the world 2 income streams on something that they're already. So I'm against the ADU the way that the legislature's passed it.
Awesome. And Peter, any thoughts?
I mean, it's not the top of my priority list, honestly. ADUs, or I think the state has passed a law saying that we have to have them, and we've complied with that. I don't think we've seen many of them. It's basically an ADU is you're putting a new building in your backyard, and you could rent it out. And you don't now have to jump through a lot of hoops in order to do that. I think that's, doesn't have much bearing on what we can do about it here in Medfield. And we've got sort of bigger fish to fry, honestly. I'm not in favor of the ADU legislation, but it was passed and we have to manage as best we can.
Okay. This is also a hard one to keep to a short answer because these are oftentimes complex and there's a lot of background, but I'm going to ask about Parcel B on Hospital Road and your view on its use and the use of the property on that side of the road. Known to many as the Sledding Hill area, but also there's some overlap with other, very valuable parcels that, that people care about. So Peter, speak to that.
Gus, this is your focus of the last
so
2
take
decades.
your best shot.
But I'll lead. Listen, I think that, as I understand it, and keep me honest here, there's roughly a third of the land on the left side as you go up there is developable. The problem is nobody knows where that third is. And that's why when people say, I got a great idea, we'll put something up at Hospital Hill area, no one can clearly articulate, well, where? Because it's not been defined. And it's not been clear with the state, and it's not been cleared with the environmental, and it's not been cleared with anybody. And so the problem is that it's this ethereal thing out in the distance that it's always a mirage because the hard work of defining what that third is has not been done. And so when we talk to a private developer who might want to put a basketball facility on some part of it, well, actually quite rightly, people can say, well, maybe the only part that's buildable is right on the top of the sledding hill, which no one wants. And other people say, well, couldn't be that. We wouldn't do that. Well, the problem is that the work has not been done by the town to figure out, well, which are that third, and how do we get that defined? And so, because that's not been done, it's always around the bend. There's always another chance. Maybe we'll put something up there one day. But the one time it was talked about this year, there was a line out the door at the townhouse with people saying, don't do that. Preserve open space. So on top of the fact that the work hasn't been done to define the spot, to make people feel better, to know it's not going to be on the sledding hill, there are still people, more than probably a third, which is what you would need in an override anyway, there are more than a third of the people seem to be against anything up there. And so I think it has been a hindrance to the planning of other things because this ethereal thing is always out there as something that might be done in the future. And I think that's a shame because as it comes back to the FAF Center, people say, well, maybe we should build something up on the sledding hill or near the sledding hill, or maybe some developer will build something and we don't have to build anything. But none of that work has been done.
Okay.
It's a mirage, and unfortunately, even if it was well-defined, it seems a lot of people don't want to do anything on it. And I think that's just an unfortunate situation, but that's where we are.
And Gus?
Pete, about at least 85% of that answer was pretty good. It was,
Okay.
I actually agree with it.
Gentlemen's bees?
So so I add a couple things, but not to criticize or undercut. It's 12 acres, which is, it's like 37 acres there, so you're right. But what happened is when we bought the property, Mike Sullivan basically negotiated a deal with the state in exchange for 12 acres of the Holmquist land, which is over back behind Wheelock, putting that in as open space in order for us to be able to develop 12 acres on parcel B south of Hospital Road. And the rationale, I think, behind doing that was the Odyssey House was originally there. So even though that whole area is sort of open space, so agricultural, there was a rationale for why there was a certain amount of that had always been used for industrial purposes. So that's how we rationalized it. But Pete's right. When the opportunity, given the circumstances, the emergency circumstances the Parks and Rec Department had when they lost the FAF Center, this opportunity came up by a developer who had a concept, which we would have had to have gone through a complete open competition. So the fact that somebody came in with an idea was intriguing. But that wasn't like, well, then there's a sole source deal that was going to happen. But he offered to build a Parks and Rec facility there, south of Hospital Road, which is where the Parks and Rec Department had proposed it be built back in the late teens, I guess it was. Offered to give us or build us a facility that would be the Parks and Rec facility in the hopes that the basketball complex that he also wanted to build there, that the town would want to use that basketball complex and rent it, similar to the things the town's doing now with the Kingsbury Club. It sounded like it was the best way to get a Parks and Rec facility built in a, we'll get into this in more detail later, so I won't get all the way down this.
Next question.
Okay, well, I mean, when we moved here in '95, the Parks and Rec facility was number 5 on the capital projects list. My youngest son wasn't even born. He's now 28 years old. He's living in, and there's been no facility. So that's kind of how long it's taken, because the town's never been in a position to pay for a facility. This was a chance. I thought it would be a no-brainer. I don't know if the audience was quite out the door, but we certainly had a full house at the select board meeting when that came up. I actually don't believe 1/3 of the people are against it. I think that the people who are for it were not really there to speak to it. It was, we drew out the open space people. The people that were against it that spoke fundamentally are against any of that not being open space, even though we've paid the price to be able to develop 12 acres. So that's kind of how I see that part.
Interesting. Well, why don't we then, I'll let you take the lead on this one. Talk about Park and Rec, the FAF Center, your coming up, the Warren article that you have, and you know, give a little perspective. I have some perspective. I was one of those people on Park and Rec at the end of the '90s, and you know, when this thing was talked about as well. So what's going on now? What's your Warren article all about? What do you think should happen? What are the variables?
Yeah, I think you know, not to take a walk down memory lane, but I think one of the things that's really critical in understanding the situation is that in 2017, the town received a report from the structural engineer that was hired by the town that said that the building, the FAF Center, was in structural decay and needed to be replaced. And in 2018, and there was a number of other buildings that needed to be replaced. And I think, you know, Gus led an effort in 2018 as he joined the select board to put together a proposal that allowed a lot of those buildings to be updated. There's now an annual appropriation for maintaining buildings all throughout Medfield. And that is...
I don't deserve credit for
well,
that. Was
I'm being generous.
Mike Martucci probably drove that one, but
at any rate.
Thanks anyway.
And so at that time, there was so now every year, there's roughly $1 million above that 2.5% we've talked about that is used for, and it's indexed for inflation, but anyway, roughly $1 million that is available to maintain buildings. And that's kept the light on, kept the roofs from kind of leaking across all of our different buildings. But in real life, The situation is that you can't really fix or build anything with the $1 million that roughly comes in from the additional appropriation for capital facilities. So the 2018 capital facilities override allowed for, debt exclusion override allowed for maintenance to be done. But at the FAF Center, a little bit of maintenance was done. I think that maybe they changed the bathrooms or something like that. I think they put stalls in. It was the only thing over a decade that's been done since that 2017. And so what happened in recently, 18 months ago, 2024, this would have been 18 months ago, the building was shut because it was, surprise, surprise, structurally deficient. And so the engineer, different engineer this time, also hired by the town, says you can't do it. The people are going to get hurt. The roof is going to collapse, or the walls are going to collapse. So the facility was shut. And that's a terrible situation because it was very foreseeable. And what's also terrible is that we've sort of done balanced budgets for many years in between 2018 and now. We haven't had a lot of debt overrides. We did high fives, shook hands, and said, yay, we balanced the budget at 2.5%. But all the while, all we did was pay for making sure the roof didn't leak or the buildings didn't fall down. But we didn't address the structural problems, which were these buildings are, particularly the FAF Center, is in structural decay. And we've known that for a decade, and it hasn't happened. And so the very foreseeable thing happened, which was that the building was shut. And the problem has been that it's still shut. And there's actually still no effort happening to fix it. And there's still talk, well, maybe we should, do something up in the Hospital Hill. It's still very loose. And we have a beautiful plot of land right in the center of town that is now getting, I believe, personally, getting sucked into the vortex of the Dale Street School project. And the reason is because we've now hired an OPM. The school building committee is doing an amazing job. They're doing everything right. But of course, they're going to look at, well, maybe we use that FAF land. And of course, what's going to happen is they're going to propose, well, we can get rid of all the baseball fields, or maybe we can just move things around so that we can use this land. It'll be more efficient. So what's going to happen is when the public is shown beautiful renderings of what the school could look like, the ones that roll right over the FAF are the ones that are going to be the most desirable looking. But unfortunately, no one in the town will have had a chance to compare A against B, because there is no B. Yep. So why would you choose a less desirable school rendering against the nothing? And so I think that's really unfortunate. And that's why I proposed, which was actually surprisingly difficult to propose, what you're supposed to have in Massachusetts is a government of the people, for the people, and you're supposed to propose what you think we should do and write a citizen's warrant and get your views out there. This was not that straightforward or easy to do because it's complicated, particularly with the FAF Center and the legal issues around how this can be done. But at any rate, we got that done. We have now on the warrant a proposal that we rebuild a beautiful facility for the people. And it's important to note that since the time of decades past, we now have the Kingsbury facility has big giant basketball courts. That didn't happen even a few years ago, right? So what we need in a downtown facility is not some giant expansive thing, but we should try to find a way to make what other communities call an intergenerational community center. We should try to find a way to have a place where we can come together as a community and take best use of the beautiful asset of the land that's right there. And so I proposed that. It was budgeted in 2021 on the capital, long-range capital plan to have a new Parks and Rec facility. It was specified in the 2020 the long-range plan for the town, the long-range plan. And so this is something that everybody's wanted. Maybe not exactly the exact specific thing of redoing the FAF at FAF, sort of FAF at FAF is I guess how you could characterize my position. But I think that it's beyond the time where we should be considering all these different wonderful options, because if we don't make a decision now, it's going to become a parking lot.
Gus.
So I disagree with many of the points that Pete just made around this. Let me start with at least my view about what the conversations with the school building committee has been. First off, the FAF Center, that property is under the care, custody, and control of Parks and Rec. The school building committee doesn't get to decide, oh, we'd like that land,
Right.
I guess we'll take it. That land only goes to anyone else if Parks and Rec decides they want to give it up. The discussions that I've been pushing the school building committee on for a couple of months now, and I actually accepted Carolyn Casey's pushback the last time she came to the select board, a select board meeting, was I wanted the school building committee to get into collaborative discussion with Parks and Rec to see if there was a way that Parks and Rec, we could have a renovation project at Parks and Rec at the FAF Center, but with the idea that the school would build athletic facilities under an MSBA-supported design for the school that could physically be close enough to the FAF Center that Parks and Rec would be able to highly leverage those facilities. So perhaps the Dale Street School would have some enhanced athletic facilities that would nonetheless qualify for MSBA support, that would allow us to not have to build all of the athletic facilities exclusively for the FAF Center for Parks and Rec. That was sort of where I wanted to go. Carolyn pushed back, and I buy her argument. She said, listen, we're in a process of trying to design the school. We would be happy to support Parks and Rec, but Parks and Rec needs to tell us what they need. And the real dilemma that we have here is that and I've had this conversation with the chair of the Parks and Rec board, and it's recognized. The question is, what is the programmatic scope of the Parks and Rec department going to be? You don't say, oh, we have a building, let's renovate the building, and that's our building because somebody said they wanted a community center. You can't put the community center on the footprint of the FAF Center. You could put a small Parks and Rec center on the footprint of the FAF Center, and you would be supporting young kids who would be coming over from Dale Street or would be coming in from town. But a community center added a whole other dimension to this, because in that open space and recreation plan where people said we want a community center, suddenly you have a center that's not just a Parks and Rec facility, it's a Parks and Rec facility that has a COA stakeholder component to it. The Medfield Outreach is looking for a teen drop-in center. You ain't going to get a lot of teens to come from the high school to go park themselves in a little tiny corner on a building that's on the FAF Center footprint. If we truly are doing a community center, this is a big deal. It's going to be a relatively large facility, I think. And it's not going to, I don't think, I understand we differ, but I don't think the FAF Center is ever going to answer that mail. So from my standpoint, I've had this blunt conversation, not blunt, but plain conversation. You guys need to tell me what your vision is for the Parks and Rec program. Is it only a little kids program? Is it a little kids program and adults can come and play ping pong at night when the little kids aren't there? Or are you really trying to build something that attracts all the way up through high school, which would tend to throw you probably down toward Hospital Road, where you can have serious athletic facilities? Parks and Rec has not answered, and they're working on it. That's the survey, I think, was part of it. Parks and Rec has not come up with a definitive answer of what that needs to be. Therefore, I can't come up with a definitive view of what the facility we're trying to build needs to be. So certainly if Parks and Rec doesn't want the FAF Center, I think the school building committee would want to be able to take that corner of the property into account.
There it is.
But that's not, but not as a parking lot necessarily. It's not, I mean, literally if they knew they had that land, because Parks and Rec said they didn't want it, but Parks and Rec shouldn't say they don't want it unless they know where they're going to land. And so that's the moving pieces as I see it, why we're kind of right now trying to see what is it we're trying to do. Nobody can answer what we're trying to do right now.
Okay, I would like to add,
Yeah, sure.
one of the things that's driven this sort of confusion is that in 2018 there was a new bylaw that said that there should be the Permanent Planning and Building Committee should be in charge of building and planning and feasibility studies for all buildings that are not school buildings. That was updated after the failed Dale vote in 2021 or 2022 annual meeting to be also now, if it's a school building, the SBC should be in charge of building all feasibility studies, and that was what set up the SBC. The problem is that the Permanent Planning and Building Committee is in charge of doing feasibility studies in Medfield for non-school buildings. And there is no work being done on a feasibility study by the Permanent Planning and Building Committee for anything at the FAF Center site. And when I inquired about it, people are sending me emails of communication from the Select Board from 2019. This has not been done right. And it's the bylaw is incredibly clear in black and white on the town's website and the town code. The Permanent Planning and Building Committee should be doing feasibility studies after the approval from the Select Board. That has not happened, and that's why there's no other Plan B. And what's happening now is because there's no end to sort of bring it all together, the Parks and Recreation Committee is proposing a building at Hinckley right now. So they may think that that's what they need, but as a citizen, I think we should have a community center at the FAF.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people agree with me.
We could, no, actually, we could go, but this could, on this Warren
would've been a good
article, and I know you appeared before the Warren Committee, and there's kind of a pretty detailed perspective on that can be gathered by looking at that hearing, and I'm sure it will also play out at town meeting that way. But, this is Park and Rec, its facility, the FAV Center, its conjunction or not with the school building process. Big issue, so I appreciate your perspectives from both of you. And next question, one of our sponsors is Medfield Environmental Action, and I'd just like to ask you about, we made a commitment to kind of work towards net zero 2050, and perspective on that commitment, the progress we're making, what else we should be doing or could be doing. Gus, I'll start with you this time.
So for the record, when the article to commit to supporting net zero 2050 was up, I spoke at the town meeting against it. Not because I have a disagreement about trying to get, improve environment and have less impact, but my point was there was no real clear plan. The statement on that article was that we would support the state's efforts to achieve net zero by 2050. And I think that's a really important distinction, because I've read some articles that suggest the state is backing off their own commitment to actually getting there because they're seeing what it takes that's hard to get there. My issue at the time was that we were making a philosophical statement. We weren't putting any money against it. We weren't actually signing up for anything. So it was like everybody's saying yes because every other town is doing it. And my point was, but we're not actually saying what we're going to do. When it comes to the environment, I told you I got a public policy degree in energy and environmental policy when I graduated from high school. And in your yearbook, you say, what do you want to be? I said I wanted to be an environmentalist, even though the guidance counselors said, yeah, that might not be a good choice for you right now in these days, but way back then. I am in favor of us finding ways to take positive environmental action that also makes economic sense. I'm a member of the Community Choice Aggregation Committee, that's a subcommittee of the Energy Committee. Megan Sullivan gets credit for getting me to flip on the default system, because I don't like defaults where you have to opt out of something that you're going to be put into. She sold me because she said, but this will be cheaper than staying on Eversource Basic. I don't mind forcing people into making decisions that save them money, that are viewed as good things. And so the community choice aggregation is a great example where there's hundreds of thousands of dollars that the consumers have saved. I'm all in favor of those kinds of things. I'm not in favor of blind commitments to goals and nobody's put the price tag on it. So I'm pretty consistent about that. And when it comes to 2050, I'm happy we're going in a good direction. I've got solar panels on. I haven't paid Eversource a dime for electricity, going on for 3 years right now because I have solar panels. I'm glad we're putting solar panels up on the schools. I can't wait for us to put solar panels up on the landfill. but I always am looking for the economic justification behind it.
Thanks. Pete?
I would just say that I admire the sentiment behind it, and I think it's admirable, but I think that the energy costs in Massachusetts are the biggest political liability in this upcoming election for the state. I mean, we have very, very expensive energy. It's boomed over the past few years. I think we're second only to California in terms of high cost of energy. So I think that as we review and renew our buildings, of course we should make them energy efficient, but we should not be driving additional cost just to meet a mandate. And because we have to be mindful of everybody is trying to, barely make this, their budgets connect, and it's not a good idea to be driving at just an aspirational mandate without keeping in mind the added cost that it might be driving. So I would say, I would agree with Gus on this one. I think that it, and actually, as we went through July, we had a very important meeting from the town's consultant on all the structural and energy needs of all the school buildings and all the town buildings. And they came up with the title said, and energy efficiency. The prior decade, it was structural report, the 2017 one that we knew the FAF Center had a problem. This year, it was structural report and energy efficiency report. But the price tag was over $100 million, excluding the Dale Street School. And so if there was ever a time when we should be mindful of the fact that we have big fish to fry, and we should be attacking those climate goals as we fix the structural needs of the buildings in the scope.
It gives the voters at home a sense of the breadth of the position with the questions that we've asked, and questions that I'm going to leave kind of on the back of the page before I get to the final question, around the town's infrastructure, historic preservation in town, the Community Preservation Act. These are questions I'm not asking. We could talk about transparency in government and all of those things, but just in the interest of time, we have to turn to the state hospital. That project, it's an enormous project for Medfield. Perspective from each of you on from the select board on where we should be going, where we are going, in what ways we can influence that project positively. Why don't you go first, Gus, and then Pete, you can have the last word on that. Then we'll have closing statements, and we'll be wrapping up.
So the state hospital, as I said, I've been involved with the state hospital probably since about 2012. During the 5-year master reuse plan development, I actually wasn't a member of the committee, but I attended virtually every meeting that I could, simply as a citizen being there, watching. I started going when Ken Richards stepped off the committee. I was trusting him to kind of keep watching on it. He stepped off, and I started going. And I tried to offer constructive, helpful comments. Steve Nolan, a couple times I said, I'm trying to do that. And he said, yeah, I think you are. So although I wasn't always in agreement with the committee, I tried to frame my comments and feedback in a way that was positive. So it's been near and dear to me, and I've been close to it for a long time. Bill Massaro is one of the people that's probably been closer and more knowledgeable about some of the technical stuff, because he, along with John Harney and John Thompson, if we hadn't had them in town, we would not have the clean site that we have. They understood how to work the state bureaucracy to get the state to actually do stuff. Where we are on it right now is we're looking, I should say Trinity is the developer, and then Belforge is a separate thing. We have a $99 a year lease with Belforge, which was the first piece that started to do something. I think I can take credit for being the select board member that actually pushed for that lease. And as an engineer, the short answer for the engineers out there is it's because the dynamic coefficient of friction is less than the static coefficient of friction. And I figured if I could get something moving on the state hospital, it would help to get other stuff moving. That's the dynamic coefficient of friction part. So Belforge has been doing some great work trying to get to the point where they can actually get to the constructions. That's the little piece. Trinity needs to get, I would say, at least $20 million of the $25 million that it needs to fund the basic site infrastructure cost before they'll be in a position to be able to go out for private funding. So the issue here, what we thought was they were going to start construction 2 years ago. We've given them extensions. The state is, through the MassWorks program, says the most we can give you is $5 million a year. We've actually bet a little better than that, because in 2 years' time we have $10.5 million. We thought we were only going to get $1 million, and then all of a sudden, I think the lieutenant governor got involved or something, and suddenly another $4.5 million showed up this year. So what you're seeing is the construction that's on the front lawn, that's bringing the infrastructure to the campus itself and over to Belforge, so that Belforge will actually have utilities this summer. And you're also going to see the 3 intersections on Harding and West and North. All of those are also part of the money that's coming in this year. We still have to, we just had a changeover in the Housing and Livable Communities Secretary. The background sounds to me like the new person will be more inclined to want to support this kind of a project. To get the $4.5 million this year, we agreed to change the criteria for what affordable is. We've actually allowed more of the 60% and even maybe 40%, okay. Which is how we got that money. So that's where we're at, and for those who are close to the, come on Tuesday night and you'll hear the latest dust up, which is that we shut the campus down at our last meeting because of the construction work that's being done and because the access road to the north parking lot was full of snow. That has gotten a number of
another issue that is going to be left on the table,
if you want an exciting meeting, come on Tuesday night from what we have for advance warning.
Thanks.
I would just say, you know, Gus started the discussion saying this was his most important issue, and I think he deserves all the credit, and along with others that he's worked with for an amazing job there. And I think we should continue to drive that forward and bring it home. It's not my top issue. I've outlined a number of different things I think we need to focus on, but I think he should be commended for the work he's done there, and I hope it will be an amazing result when it's completed. Okay.
Well, first of all, thank you both for being candidates. I'll give you literally 30 seconds if you want to say anything that wasn't said, or make a plea to the voters, or whatever you'd like to do.
I support a affordable Medfield. I support our schools. I support improved communication. I support an improved budget process that's more modern, with solutions and ideations that comes from the community to try to solve a difficult challenge. The state funding that comes to Medfield and to all communities in Massachusetts is down 25% in the last 25 years. Unrestricted state aid has not gone up, it's gone down. That's put budget pressures on all communities in Massachusetts. It's a difficult situation. It's not because of bad planning. Everyone is doing a very good job. They're trying their hardest with difficult situation. That said, there's new approaches we can take and new solutions we can ideate, and that will come from better and improved communication. And that's what I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gus, final word?
Yeah, I'll comment on something that you didn't have as a question and we didn't cover. When I first ran for the Board of Selectmen 9 years ago, there's one other piece that caused me to run. At the time, in fall of 2016 was the first campaign that Trump was involved with, and this is not a partisan comment, but the polarization, the vitriol that actually had crept in before that, but was in full bloom. It's the West Pointer in me. I basically, in my head, put a flag on a hill called Medfield and said, I don't want to have that happen here. I think we've all done a pretty good job of not letting that happen here. That doesn't mean we don't have heated conversations and we don't have some breaches, but as I look back over the 9 years, somehow or another, I think our town, more than most, has managed to avoid that kind of just tension and unproductive confrontation. As a selectman, the thing that I think I've learned in terms of what do I try to do to help make sure that is happening, I try to listen to other people. I try to remain respectful. That doesn't mean I'm timid. You know, people that know me know I'll go after anybody on an issue, but I do try to keep it respectful. And what I find is in meetings, giving people the time to speak. We run a pretty loose ship when it comes to citizen comment and participation in our discussions. That can lead to long meetings. But I think it's a key to, if we've been successful as a board of selectmen and a select board over the past several years, if we've been successful in your eyes, I think the fact that we do that has been a big reason why it's happened.
Well, we did it here today as well, right? We gave everybody an opportunity to speak and to express their views, and I hope it's going to provide for more informed voters, and I hope those voters in Medfield will go to the polls on March 30th and consider what they heard, you know, in this interview, and thanks again.
Can I
Thanks
say
to
one
Medfield
last thing?
TV. No.
I want, I want to thank Pete for running, because I'll tell you what, the only other time I've ever been in a competitive election was the very first one where I had two competitors. It's a lot more fun having a competitive election. People are more interested. Come out and vote.
Yeah.
Call the shot the way you see it, and we'll go from there.
There you go.
Great.
You have options.
Yeah, thank you.
There you go.
Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much.
Yeah, and has this dialogue.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Okay. Thanks, everyone. And thanks to our studio audience.
Thanks, yeah.
Thank you for being here, representing the citizens of our town and the residents.
Yep.
Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you guys.
Okay.
Thank you.